to you, and thank you so much for joining us today, the 3rd of May 2023. And here are the headlines of some of the leading newspapers from across Africa and from outside. We start with the newspapers from Kenya. The Standard newspaper. Raila calls for more demos as talks stall. Opposition leaders say they will be back on the streets tomorrow, accusing the government of withdrawing their security and lying on cost of maize flour. The announcement came as governors sought to break the Raila-Ruto impasse. That story you'll find on page 6 and 7. Shakahola victims were suffocated, autopsy now shows. And then Sabina replaces Uhuru in Jubilee leadership coup, and Cyril takes the helm at Kenya Power. The Daily Nation. Why Raila's city protest flopped. Mackenzie cult forced members to starve to death, police tells court. The Star newspaper. New motion to deny Uhuru Raila pension. Outfits participating in anti-government demos could be denied political parties fund. The stories on page 4 and 5. The People Daily. Raila demo stopped as new leaders vow to be back in the streets tomorrow. Governor set up a team to mediate between the rival parties, and bipartisan talks hit war as teams fail to agree once again. The Business Daily. China gives Kenya the tiniest loan since 2008 in fresh shift. Chinese new loan falls to 1.7 billion Kenya shillings from 29.5 billion Kenya shillings. Kenya is cutting borrowing as Beijing limits the debt. Taifa Leo, Sabina ampindua Uhuru. Okay, that is our leading newspaper here in Kiswahili. The Daily News from Zimbabwe. Catholic priests worry over polls, bemoan lack of movement or national dialogue. The Daily News as well from this one is from Tanzania. Cherry workers extol Samia. Government to expand education infrastructure. The Herald from Zimbabwe. Government steps in to rescue PSMA's affiliates. Harare Chirumba Highway upgrade local project partners approved. And then the Citizen from Tanzania. How government plans to raise 20 trillion Kenya shillings through PPPs. Annual pay rise possible despite struggling entities. Uganda minister shot dead by bodyguard, and Kenya opposition restarts protest. That is what we have on the front page of the Citizen. From Tanzania, the Daily Trust. This one is from Nigeria. Akpapio Yari scrambled for PDP senators. 2 months after elections, customs officers yet to get allowances. The Nation as well from Nigeria. Adamawa police quiz detain REC INEC commissioners. The Daily Monitor from Uganda. Enkola killer was a reject. That is what we have there. The Observer from, where is this? I guess from Nigeria. No, from Uganda, sorry. This is from Uganda. Yeah, so bigwigs, iron sheets files missing at DPP. Okay. The Punch from Nigeria. Legal battle begins Monday as tribunal hears petitions that challenges President-elect's victory, and I think the preparation for his swearing in is ongoing. It's meant to be on the 29th of this month, I suppose, so that is also there. So, all right, let's look at some other newspapers from the U.S. The Guardian, the U.S. edition. Toxic train of pollution. States step up to curb the use of forever chemicals. The Washington Post. They've waited decades for D.C. housing aid. Is help finally near? What takes a bloody pivot? Debt deal strategy hinges on framing, and Hollywood writers on first strike in 15 years. The no spotlight British town that explains a king, and Zelensky U.S. kept silent on disclosures. The New York Times. South Korea created a brutal sex trade for American soldiers. Berlin forces up to Russia's spies it long ignored, and its debt limit. Constitutional debate is on after rebound. Factories in U.S. fall into slump, and Hollywood writers go on strike, and late night shows go dark. All right, the USA Today. Israel's battle with itself, democracy is far from over. JP Morgan takes over after failure of First Republic. Industry blast PVC risk claims, and family called police 5 times before rampage. All that in the USA Today. All right, let's look at the ones from the UK. The Daily Mail. Man held in shotgun cartridges drama at the palace. By the way, it's just 3 days to go to the coronation. Controlled explosion after knife suspect throws ammunition over gates day before coronation. Does this prove its love actually for Bill and Anna? Okay. The Daily Express, lockdown at palace after man arrested. The Mirror. Coronation security scare, palace in lockdown after attack. And The Sun, palace shotgun terror, cops swoop in on man with ammo at gate. And then The Guardian, new anti-protest powers rushed into law in time for coronation. Grey won't cooperate as inquiry report held. Hopes for progress in doctors' pay dispute. And the Daily Telegraph, spies take the fight to text scammers. And then I think that is what we have in some of these newspapers from the US, and of course from the UK, and of course we started with those from Africa. So let's just a quick weather condition across a few selected cities in Africa, and then we'll just get into the detailed bulletin. Johannesburg, it is going to be mostly sunny with highs of 24 degrees Celsius and lows of 13 degrees Celsius. Nairobi, thunderstorms is expected with highs of 23 degrees Celsius and lows of 16 degrees Celsius. Also, it's going to be a bit sunny, and I guess some rain later on. In Accra, Ghana, highs of 31 degrees Celsius and lows of 36 degrees Celsius. Is going to be mostly sunny there in Accra. In Dakar, Senegal, highs of 26 degrees Celsius and lows of 22 degrees Celsius. Is going to be mostly cloudy there. And in Abuja, Nigeria, highs of 34 degrees Celsius and lows of 23 degrees Celsius. And it's going to be partly cloudy there in Abuja and in Kinshasa, that is in, I did say Zaire, Democratic Republic of Congo. It's going to be partly cloudy with highs of 32 degrees Celsius and lows of 22 degrees Celsius. And Luanda, highs of 31 degrees Celsius, lows of 25 degrees Celsius. And it's going to be mostly cloudy there in Luanda. All right, so I guess you're now up to date, and whatever your weather condition, just try to enjoy it and maybe dress appropriately. It's a bit chilly here in Nairobi, so okay. So let's start our bulletin from Sudan. And Sudan, warring generals have agreed in principle to a week of ceasefire to start from Thursday. The Foreign Ministry in neighboring Sudan, one of the country's leading peace efforts, has said while there is currently a 3-day truce in place, fighting has continued with a major humanitarian crisis looming. The violence between the army and the paramilitary rapid support forces is now in its 3rd week, with each side accusing the other of breaching previous truces. South Sudan's President Salva Kiir stressed the importance of having a longer ceasefire to allow each side to name representatives for peace talks. The Reuters news agency reports the statement as saying U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has spoken to leaders from neighboring countries to find ways to resolve the violence in Sudan, while the African Union urged the two factions for a sustained ceasefire. And the UN's World Food Programme says its ability to resume deliveries of life-saving aid in Sudan will depend on whether the latest ceasefire agreements take hold. The warring military factions have agreed to a 7-day truce on Thursday, but previous ceasefires have been repeatedly violated. WFP spokesperson speaking to the media said that the agency would prioritize emergency food distribution to pre-existing refugees as well as the people who are newly displaced by the violence. She said operations would be hampered by the looting of thousands of tons of food from warehouses in Western Darfur region. And the final UK rescue flights are expected to take off from Sudan on Wednesday, the government has said. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly said British nationals still wanting to leave the country should go to the Coral Hotel in Port Sudan by 10 a.m. local time. He added that there would be no further British evacuation flights from the city. Some 2,341 people have so far been airlifted to safety on 28 UK flights. It was previously thought the evacuation had ended on Monday when planes left Sudan for Cyprus. But the UK government has described its evacuation as the longest and largest operation of any Western nation. Those rescued during the airlift include Britons, their dependents, Sudanese NHS staff, and other eligible nationalities. Early on Thursday, Downing Street said 1,195 British nationals had been airlifted out so far last week. A negotiated short-term ceasefire allowed UK evacuation flights to take off from an airstrip near Khartoum, while the fragile ceasefire held. On Monday evening, 2 additional evacuation flights left Port Sudan, carrying many British nationals. The most recent 2 flights brought 144 people to safety. Speaking earlier in the House of Commons, African Minister Andrew Mitchell told MPs the evacuation had been extremely successful. He said the UK was maintaining a diplomatic presence in Port Sudan, as well as at Sudan's borders with Egypt and also Ethiopia. We head over to Uganda, and the parliament has watered down an anti-homosexuality bill that originally criminalized people for simply identifying as LGBTQ+ when it was first approved in March. The proposed legislation outraged human rights defenders. Members of the public are going to have to report individuals in same-sex relationships to the authorities. An activist told the media the debate around the bill had led to fear of more attacks on gay people. Later on, the bill was returned to Parliament after President Yoweri Museveni suggested changes. He said the clause penalizing people who identify as gay would have led to the prosecution of people simply for their physical appearances. Same-sex acts have long been illegal in Uganda as a legacy of colonial rule. Even though this latest version of the bill has been watered down since its first appearance last month, it is still one of the toughest pieces of anti-gay legislation on the continent. Landlords who knowingly rent premises for homosexuals act risk going to prison for 7 years. The bill still prescribes the death penalty for what it calls aggravated offences such as child abuse. And public will also be required to report to the authorities any form of homosexual abuse against children or other vulnerable people. The bill was passed with an overwhelming majority, with only one member of parliament opposing it. The next step will be for the president to sign it into law. The draft law has been widely condemned by international human rights. A similar law was struck down by Uganda's Constitutional Court in 2014. And in Liberia, President George Weah has sacked Kupa Krua a few days after the telecommunications minister attended an opposition event. Mr. Krua is said to have gone to the opposition Unity Party political rally last Friday, where it named its presidential running mate ahead of October's general election. The move angered senior members of the ruling Coalition for Democratic Change (CDC) party, who demanded the minister to be dropped from government. President Weah has nominated Walia Seiwa Duna, a veteran public servant, to replace him. His nomination, announced on Monday evening, is awaiting the Senate's approval. The elections are expected to be hotly contested, with the incumbent facing strong challenges from the Unity Party's Joseph Boakai and Alexander Cummings of the collaborating political parties. And in Senegal, opposition leader Ousmane Sonko maintains he survived what he calls an assassination attempt. Speaking to a press on Monday, Sonko said a foreign laboratory analyzed the substance sprayed in on him last March and concluded it was toxic and lethal. And the Pastive party leader said mid-March that he felt unwell after being tear-gassed by the police during a forced transfer to the Dakar court, where he was to appear. The opposition leader has said after the incident that he spent 5 days in a private clinic in Dakar for treatment, and the samples had been taken from his clothes and sent abroad for toxicological expertise last month. Senegalese government spokesperson Trade Minister Abdul Karim Fofana denied Sonko's accusations that the police had been involved. Sonko insisted on Monday that a judge could write to the facilities for the findings. He also called for a national civil disobedience against the judiciary that he considers partial and further rejected any dialogue against President Macky Sall. Sonko, who came third in Senegal's presidential election in 2019, is vying for next year's election. However, the journey to get there hasn't been smooth. He has had several brushes with the law and was accused of rape by an employee of a salon where he went for a massage. The trial is due to begin on May the 16th. And then, not finally, but we head over to Somalia. The army said it had killed 67 Al-Shabab militants and seized large amounts of explosive in an operation in the north central Mudug region. Brigadier General Mohammed Tahlil Bihi told reporters on Tuesday that military was acting on intelligence about movements of the Al-Shabab group. Bihi said the operation in the Haral Dere district of central Mudug region took place at around 1 a.m. after 120 jerrycans containing improvised explosive devices were offloaded from a boat and carried in a vehicle that was guided by 69 militants. Bihi said Somali's National Army fired rocket-propelled grenades at the vehicle and destroyed it. He said only 2 militants were captured alive. And of course, the media was not able to independently verify the army's casualty figures. Somali's army has been conducting joint offensives with local militias against the Islamist militants since last July as part of an all-out war against the group. In a town hall meeting on Monday night, President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud declared that Al-Shabab would be eliminated by the end of the year. Mohamud said the second phase of the operation would soon begin in Somali's southwest state and in Jubaland region. Somalia is also depending on troops from Djibouti, Ethiopia and Kenya after neighboring countries in January agreed to jointly launch military operations against Al-Shabaab's strongholds. And then we end in Nigeria, where Food and Drug Control Agency NAFDAC says it is taking swift action to investigate a popular brand of noodles over alleged presence of a substance associated with increased risk of cancer. The agency said in a statement it was conducting random sampling and analysis of Indomine noodles, including the seasoning for the presence of ethylene oxide. It said it was extending the investigation to other brands of instant noodles on the Nigerian market. NAFDAC said the probe follows recall of the special chicken flavor noodle brands last week in Malaysia and Taiwan after the substance was detected in some samples. Indofoods, the Indonesian food giant that makes Indomine, has, however, since defended the safety of its products. The Nigerian agency said that the implicated brand was not registered for sale in Nigeria, noting that the Post Authority were on alert not to allow its importation. Okay, that is the latest news from across the continent of Africa. This Indomine noodles, I don't buy it, but I think it's in a lot of Kenyan supermarket shelves. So maybe even the Kenyan government should take precaution and perhaps do their own investigations and take the samples and take to the government laboratory and see if at all whatever Kenyans are consuming on this brand or any other brand that is suspected to be having this dangerous substance, just to be sure, because they have been recalled in 2 markets, in Malaysia and in Taiwan. Okay, I know Indomine. It's an international, brand of noodles. So I think it will be perhaps appropriate for our government here and other governments just to perform their own investigation, take the samples to the lab and check and just be sure that it is safe for the consumption, because I know it is all over the shelves in the supermarkets in this country, this particular brand and others. Okay, but of course the company has come out to defend its brand. It is from Indonesia, and it has said that its product is safe for use, and it has vehemently defended that. But just to be on a safer side, it won't hurt to just perform your own investigations and your own laboratory test. I think it's important when certain alarms are raised, especially over food or medicine or things like that, then I think it's upon the governments where maybe this product is found to take the necessary precautions and steps to ensure that their citizens consume food or drugs or anything else that is safe and that is not putting their lives at risk, so that we don't have a situation like what happened, was it in Chad? Some places in Western Africa where children were dying from consuming a cough syrup that I think was from India. I can't remember the exact country. And kids kept dying, before they realized. I think about 2 or 3 countries in West Africa. It had claimed a lot of children. So these are things we don't joke around with. And then when you could hear the stories after that, apparently when these medicines are about to expire, maybe from the European market or the Indian market, some scrupulous individuals take these medicines that are about to expire and that are being removed from the shelves in these markets. They put a new label and perhaps a new expiry date, and they bring them over here in Africa. Why these people cannot be charged with mass murders, I don't know. But that was part of the reason why these kids died from these syrups and other, drugs-related deaths. Sometimes it happens like that, but also sometimes it does happen that we allow for something to come in that it might not be fit, is not even acceptable in other markets, but in Africa, we allow it. It's like how we don't even put a premium on human life. It's really sad. It's really sad. So I'm just hoping that some action will be taken, and every government where this product and others are being sold, they take the responsibility to, just as a precaution, the government of Kenya, as a precaution, because I know this thing. I don't even consume it, but I do know a lot of households, especially with young kids. It's a very popular dish with young children. They love the noodles. For some reason, they just find it great. And then college kids also, I'm told, are really, they like it for whatever reason. So it is being consumed a lot. So I think it will be prudent on your part, Kenya Bureau of Statistics, to also take the similar position or precaution as Nigeria has, and just run your own test to ensure that we are safe. Like, we already have enough problems, and we don't want anything else that can jeopardize the lives of Kenyans. And this, I think, should cut across anywhere else in the continent. So, okay. So Liberia President George Weah sacked Cooper Krua a few days after the telecommunications minister attended an opposition event. It's quite interesting. Like, our politics are so intolerant. And I think that's why President Suluhu Hassan of Tanzania, I like her very much. I like her leadership style. I like her attitude. I like how the changes that she's been able to make. And most importantly, I like that she understands what she means for Tanzania, what the office she holds in Tanzania means. And most importantly, the responsibility that she has as the head of state of Tanzania. And one of which is to act as a symbol of unity for the people of Tanzania. And she's been able to do that methodically, strategically. Smart lady. She was able to reach out to the opposition. They're back in the country. The noise has stopped. All this noise they've been making in the international media, this and that, Boy and the rest, they're back in Tanzania. They're going around doing their own opposition work. You know the thing with opposition, you keep targeting them. Then you're giving this noise a lot of space, because that's what, that's what propels, this noise further. But if you allow them to do whatever they need to do, of course, under the parameters of what the Constitution allows, then you realize at some point they'll just get bored or they will not find the need to keep attacking the government, So So that is how that has worked in Tanzania. And President Suluhu, being a smart woman that she is smart. She brought them back. I've not heard any of them go to this international media and issue these interviews they used to do. They're back home, they're helping in rebuilding Tanzania, and they're working together. And I think when she attended the Women's Day celebration, the International Day of Women, I think it happened, is it in March? Yes. And opposition had organized for an event. And being the head of state and being also a woman, she had every right to organize for even a bigger, better International Women's Day celebration to celebrate the women in Tanzania, that she is one of them and that she represents, and all that. But President Suluhu, in her humility and in her wisdom, did not try to have a parallel event, of which she could have. Instead, she chose to attend an event that was organized to celebrate the women in Tanzania on the International Women's Day, an event that was organized by the opposition. She graced that event, they treated her with dignity, and that to me is a mark of a leader. Tolerance is important. If we can learn to tolerate each other, even if I don't agree with your decisions, but I will support and I will defend your rights to enjoy that space, as long as what you're doing is not in contravening the Constitution. So she has become a symbol of national unity. And through her actions, she's been able to bring the community of Tanzanians together. And we had already started seeing a lot of division, something that was really strange, because as we have grown knowing Tanzania, we know it's a country that is united, it's a country that has very strong values, it's a country that, they speak in one voice, and national unity has just been one of their greatest, strengths. But at some point there a few years ago, especially with President Pombe Magufuli and I think his ways of leadership and all that, it caused a bit of fragmentation, and we could see certain noises and certain things that we never imagined could be coming out of Tanzania. And President Suluhu has been able to salvage that image, and she's rebuilding Tanzania. She has brought the people together. You cannot develop, and every time I read the headlines, let me just check one of the headlines from Tanzania newspapers here, so that you can see what happens when you have a leader who understands her assignment very well. Every time you read the headlines from Tanzania, something nice is happening. Cherry workers extol Samia. They're very happy. Government to expand education infrastructure. Let me go to the Citizen. How government plans to raise 20 trillion Tanzania shillings through PPPs. The government said yesterday its ambitious plan to mobilize $9 billion in capital through public-private partnerships by 2025-2026 to achieve is still achievable, and then annual pay rises possible despite struggling entities, she promised. So all of these things you can see. Government outlines plans to grow fisheries, livestock sectors, like the things that are geared towards improving the lives of the people of Tanzania. It's just development after development. It's just good. It's just good news. I wish the rest of our leadership, especially from this region, would just stop and see what is it that is going on here in Tanzania. And I think before we know it, Tanzania, if it keeps going at this rate that it is going, and it seems to have addressed the issue of toxic politics that already was crippling into Tanzania, I think they might overtake Kenya as the regional economic hub. Kenya is the leading economic hub in Eastern Africa. We lead, and that is great. But if we keep with this, atmosphere that we're having and the things that scare investors and all that, then that will be problematic for our economy that is already struggling. So we might need to stop and just borrow a leaf from what is happening from our southern neighbors there. And President Suluhu, I think, is doing a great job, and she is a true leader, a very wise leader. You can be a leader and lack wisdom. Wisdom is important. just being a politician is not enough. And the problem that we have in a lot of these countries is we just have politicians. And all they do is politic. They don't have strategies. They don't know what they're doing in those offices that they've been elected to do. They don't understand their assignments. They don't know their responsibilities. So you have politicians. But President Suluhu Hassan is a true leader. And she is leading from the front. So the reason why I brought up all this is because of this story of Liberian President George Weah sacking one of his ministers because this minister attended an opposition event. On one hand, I want to understand, because I think also in politics, I think loyalty is key. It's very important. And if you're attending an event, a national event organized by a rival of your boss, I don't think your boss is born to be happy. So I can understand from that perspective, but also what did he do when he attended that event? Did he speak words that were disrespectful? Did he encourage for people to work in unity, for Liberians to work in building their country? What did he say? Or the mere presence, the mere reason that he attended this reason, that is the problem. If he uttered some words to undermine the government that is working, that he's working for, then that would be a problem. But if he just attended a rally or an event that was organized by other Liberians, what is the problem with that? Why are we so intolerant? This vindictive, intolerant politics is what is crippling our countries. We must be open-minded. We must be open and to even difference of opinions. And I do understand loyalty, but also, what did he do? President George Weah, what did Cooper Cruer do when he attended this rally that was so bad that you felt now you have to remove him from this position? Did he undermine the government, your government, and the government that he was serving? Now he's been fired. Or what really happened? Okay, so I think we have to sometimes stop and look at the nature of our politics. The nature of our politics is just toxic. Politics in this continent, and not just in this continent, I mean the US is even more terrible, and other places. It's very dynamic, but those are democracies that can sustain that level of whatever it is that is going on there. They've already built strong institutions. These democracies have been there for years. The strong democracies. Ours, we're still just trying to learn the ropes and trying to get it right and trying to figure out what really works for our different countries. But if we have all this level of toxicity, it's not helping the case. It's not helping the case. And I think every now and then, that's why Dr. Masanga keep asking sometimes, do we even need elections in this continent? Because it comes with a certain level of toxicity that it doesn't work for our benefit as a continent and as a people. So that bothers me sometimes. And the level of intolerance, I think it's really, really, really worrying. So I don't know why Liberian President George Weah chose to fire this person because they attended an opposition event. But I can understand why perhaps he did that. He's planning to run again, and maybe this party that organized this event is a formidable, challenger to the president, and so he felt that maybe this minister was not being exactly loyal to him. That might jeopardize. So anyway, let's just leave that over there. Something else I wanted to talk about. This Uganda anti-gay law is just, it's just interesting, and I don't want to make it an issue here. But part of it says that even, a landlord, you can't rent somebody a premise who you suspect is homosexual and is going to perform homosexual acts in your house, in the house that you're renting to this person. If you do that, then you risk going to prison for 7 years. Okay, it's just ridiculous. Anyway, let's just leave that there and look at other other issues. I think the latest from Sudan, which is these warring generals have agreed in principle to a week ceasefire to start from Thursday. I don't know what number is this ceasefire now. Is it number 6, number 7? Because there have been many of these ceasefires, and none of these generals have really respected any of these ceasefires. So I think at this point, you don't know what to believe. You don't know if they're going to respect this ceasefire. But I know every now and then, in between those ceasefires, it enabled these foreign nationalities to get their people from Sudan. And I think majority of their countries have been able to get their people out of Sudan, especially the European ones. And also, I think a few African countries like Kenya, I think Nigeria, Somalia, South Sudan, and others. Majority of the countries have been able to get their nationalities from Sudan. And there seems to be a worry that once all these foreign nationals have left Sudan and they've been left with themselves to fight against each other, then the possibility of finding a truce the prospect of finding a lasting stability or a peace truce might be difficult, because they will not have anyone to leverage from. You know, when you have all these international nationals there, that is like a point of bargain. You can see there's a presence of the international community, so you feel they might be able to intervene in case it's possible for an intervention. But now when you're left to fight and kill each other, really, you can't hold anybody hostage other than your own people. So you're left killing each other and killing your own people. And I don't know how that even makes sense. But they have agreed upon a ceasefire, and that is meant to start tomorrow. The other one that they agreed upon over the weekend for 72 hours did not even hold a few hours, because you could hear the RSF complaining that the army is the one that is fighting them, and the army is the one that is targeting their positions and is fighting them, and counter accusations also from the army itself. So South Sudan's President Salva Kiir stressed the importance of having a longer ceasefire to allow each side to name a representative for peace talk. And we've seen the UN did send, what is his name? He was to arrive yesterday for these talks. And there's a news item. I'll find it. It's right here. From yesterday, I did not get to talk about over what Eritrea said. I never agree so much with President Isaias Afwerki, because he's just one of the problems that we have in this continent. But yesterday, I felt that he said something quite paramount, and perhaps we should pay attention, at least for the first time, to what Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki is saying. Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki says the East African Regional Grouping, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, should be given priority in resolving the ongoing crisis in Sudan. And I do absolutely agree with Isaias Afwerki on this matter. The reason why I will agree with Isaias Afwerki in this matter, and I never agree with this head of state for anything, you know, but on this one, I absolutely support this position. Look at what happened in Ethiopia. Look at what happened in Ethiopia. When only the African Union was the one handling that conflict, we were able to find a resolve very, very quickly. And Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was very clear. He did not want the involvement of other actors from outside the continent. In fact, even having him agree for talks organized by African Union, that already was a tall order. So he finally agreed, but he also agreed on a conditionality that other foreign actors from outside the continent could not be allowed to be part of the mediation process. Do you see how we got a resolution very quickly? Because when you have all these international actors and all these interests that are being represented, and maybe the interests that are represented in these conflicts are different. For Ethiopia, it was different. Of course, we had some names being called that, being thrown around that was suspected to be supporting either side of the conflict in Ethiopia. The US was named a bit, Egypt was named a bit, and others. Of course, Eritrea outrightly was there supporting the government of Ethiopia and other actors, and of course, other interests also that might have taken advantage of the already existing problems within the Ethiopian community. But the fact that all these foreign actors were locked out of this mediation process, we were able to, Ethiopia was allowed to have conversations within itself. And so the mediators provided for a platform where they could come and have conversations and find their own solutions. And that was quick. And now they've taken over the mediation process and they're working for the rest to achieve the rest of the agreement that was agreed upon and whatever it is that needs to be worked upon for them to arrive at a space where they feel they have addressed everything else, and everyone who felt that they were aggrieved, they feel their issues have been appropriately addressed, and they're working around that, and hopefully we will see accountability, but maybe not for right now. So Isaias Afeki is saying, can we give priority to the East African regional grouping to lead this mediation process in Sudan, and specifically IGAD? And we know IGAD had already picked Kenya's President William Ruto, Djibouti's President Gulie, and also South Sudan's President Salva Kiir, who had already been mediating between the warring factions. Even in Sudan, there are some rebels in the Darfur regions and other. And President Salva Kiir has been the one helping in leading the mediation between these rebels and the government of Sudan, which has worked pretty much well. I think the mediation process was going on very well until whatever happened. And so he understands the intricacies in perhaps partly of this complex conflict that is ongoing in Sudan. So he is the right person to be part of the mediating team. And also Kenya, I think our position in this region is great, and maybe we don't even have a lot of conflicting interest there. I want to believe we don't have. I haven't heard of any. And Djibouti's president. So IGAD chose these three countries and these three leaders to spearhead this mediation process. And yesterday we were having a conversation with a section of, I won't say where, but we're having a robust conversation on the conflict management across Africa. And the question arose about why we do have the is it the in the African Union? Let me see if I can get that. We do have a section in African Union, like a piece, and in its architecture, we do have a section where women are also part of the, I think, Femnet or something, where they're part of the eminent personalities who are supposed to be helping with conflict and resolution and things like that, and just bring a woman voice in these conversations, all these mediation processes. And as much as African Union does have this as part of its peace and security architecture, but I'm shocked every now and then they have these mediation teams or whatever. We don't see them using the resource, which is these women who are also part of this African Union and who can help in leading these mediation processes to try and help. So I wonder why they do have this. Femwise, it's called Femwise, and Femwise has vigorously mobilized women and girls all over the continent and diaspora as it aims to promote professionalism and the role of women in mediation process. So if that is the work of Femwise, why can't we see Femwise take on these mediation processes, conflict prevention and peace-making efforts? Why don't we see, this is a section of the African Union Peace and Security Architecture, and we have the eminent personalities, and on that we do have the Femwise, that is the female version of that. Okay, so they are supposed to be helping in the mediation processes, in conflict prevention and in peacemaking efforts. And every now and then, wherever there is a conflict in this continent, all we hear are former presidents, Olusegun Obasanjo, former President Uhuru Kenyatta, who I think does a great job. I think they should have him anywhere. There needs to be peace talks. I think he seems to have gotten a grip of that, and he does a fantastic job. But we do also have former presidents like Salif, Johnson from Liberia, who perhaps from the experience and from the history of her country and how she was able to steer that country towards stability, her experience and her knowledge on conflict resolution could come in immense immensely and could help in finding solutions to this conflict. We have Gracia Michelle, and based on the history and how she stood by her husband, during when Mozambique was fighting to get independence and all that, and her experience and her exposure, and and what we saw her doing here in Kenya, being part of the people who led the mediation process in the 2007-2008 post-election violence in Kenya. Among other notable women, we do have Amina Mohammed here, who is like, a diplomat par excellence, and others who could really, these are resources of women that we could use their experience to try and add a voice and lend a voice to the conflicts that we do have in this continent. So that is the problem I have with the African Union. And this is not a gender card I'm trying to to pull here. It's not women versus men and whatnot. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is African Union have these FEMWISE, and its work is to help in mediation processes, conflict prevention, and peacemaking efforts to support the efforts already being made by African Union. But hardly do we ever hear any members from this architecture, peace and security architecture, coming out or being involved or being given responsibilities in spearheading these mediation processes across Africa. So African Union, what's up? Why do you really have that if you don't intend to use these resources in terms of these wise women? They're called FEMWISE. FEMWISE Africa. Why can we not involve them a little bit more in leading these mediation processes? Because sometimes maybe that's all you need to get a solution. So that is the problem I have. But otherwise, back to what Isaiah Afeki was saying, this mediation process should be left for East African regional, not for Africa, let's just say Africa period. It could be under African Union, it could be under IGAD, it could be under the East African regional, grouping, but this should be left for Africans to deal with, because we, from the information that we have been getting and from what we have been sharing, all these other actors from outside have vested interest in this conflict. They're either supporting or equipping or funding, or they're having some economic interest or whatever it is. So we cannot trust them to steer a successful mediation process. Otherwise, it will turn to be another Democratic Republic of Congo problem that will continue and we'll never see the end of it. So if you want to see the end of this chaos in Sudan, and for this conflict to end, I think we must engage Africans. We must engage people who don't have other interests that are conflicting in Sudan. And I agree with what President Afwerki is saying. He says that while the current situation in Sudan is a matter of global concern, he appreciates that, and that is true, and individual countries may express their interest as they have. Matter of fact, the US was very quick to go form a special committee to look into this Sudan matter, and I think I questioned why the move and why they would find this very important. Of all the conflicts that have gone on in Africa, I've never heard the US be quick to form a special committee to look into any of these conflicts, but it did in Sudan and other countries, of course. And while he says it is a global concern and individual countries may express their interest, the IGAD's initiative can assist the Sudanese people to transition to a new political disposition that aligns with their aspirations. The president said, that is President Afwerki, there was an urgent need for the tragic and deplorable conflict in Sudan to come to an immediate end, and for there to be a unitary defense and security organ in the country. Coming from a person who also, let me just finish up what he said, and then I can say what I needed to say. He says Eritrea is willing to provide its best assistance to address the crisis in Sudan, but the people should also be allowed to address their challenges independently. This is very rich, coming from a person who aided in and abated a conflict in another country, that is Ethiopia. So he's saying, see how we know how to prescribe. How to prescribe the solution, that we will never take that prescription ourselves, but we can prescribe it. We think this can work very well. Isaiah Afwerki imagines this can work very well in Sudan. Sudan does not need any external interference. It should be left to find its own solutions. But Eritrea did not have a problem joining the government forces in Ethiopia and fighting the TPLF, causing massive deaths and loss of properties and destruction of everything else that we've seen in the Tigray region. Mr. Isaias said Eritrea's sea, land borders, as well as its airspaces were open for Sudanese and others affected by the current conflict. He, however, insisted that Eritrea was not willing to establish. So he's saying, we can do anything else, but what we are not going to do, and I'll quote his words, we are not going to establish a refugee shop. Don't think that you're going to come here and put up tent and turn this into another Kakuma camp like what we see in Kenya. He does not have the true African spirit of the Ubuntu, or what we call. But what I like is he's very sincere. Like him or hate him, President Isaias Afwerki speaks his mind and his feelings together, and he doesn't care. So he's saying we can help, but very temporarily. Don't think you're going to come here and set up a refugee shop. Really. But was willing to provide modest assistance to the Sudanese people, just very modest, okay? Maybe just a few hours or a few days, but not coming here and setting up and trying to find some permanency here. It's not going to work. He said the ongoing conflict was a result of the military leaders engaged in a power struggle without fulfilling their responsibility to ensure a peaceful transition to an elected government. Look at that. President Isaias Afwerki is talking about democracy and a peaceful transition to an elected government. How long has he been in power? I might need to Google that because I'm not sure. Let me just Google that for us. Of Eritrea. Okay, this person who's calling on transition to happen very quickly. I don't know how long he's been in power. It's very interesting, how he's very good in advice right now. Okay, so President Isaias Afwerki, who was born on the 2nd of February 1946, an Eritrean politician and very partisan, who has been the president of Eritrea since shortly after he led the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, okay, like the TPLF. He also led another one to victory on the 24th of May 1991, ending the 30-year-old war for independence from Ethiopia, okay? In addition, President Isaias is the chairperson of Eritrea's sole legal political party. So there's only one legal political party. This person here who is advising Sudan on how to have a transition. So I would advise the people of Sudan to just pick the first part of his advice. The rest don't apply because this is not the person who can advise you on how to transit. Well, he has refused. So he has been the president as he assumed office on the 24th of May 1993. How many years? 30 years. We're in 2003. Actually, on the 24th of this month, 24th of year, he will be celebrating 30 years in power, is it? I think so. 30 years, right? But he's castigating the military leaders in Sudan for refusing to fulfill the responsibility to ensure a peaceful transition to an elected government. And yet there's only one legal political party in Eritrea. But he has the nerve to tell Sudan what to do and how to transit. And he feels that what is happening in Sudan is very tragic and deplorable conflict. Like what you caused in Tigray, President Afwerki. You mean like that? Or that is different? Or what you did was, you had legitimate reasons why you supported the government of Ethiopia in fighting the TPLF. If you're calling what is happening in Sudan tragic and deplorable, and less than 1,000 people have died, God forbid we don't get any more deaths reported. But what you helped in the government of Ethiopia in achieving is the murder of over 600,000 people. That is more than tragic. That is more than deplorable. In fact, you should not be speaking about tragic and deplorable conflict. Why you helped in furling and participated in the killings of so many people. You, the government of Ethiopia, the TPLF, and other actors, you all together, according to reports that have been even tabled at the United Nations, all of you together came together and killed all these people through your efforts. But you have the nerve to tell us today what is happening in Sudan. As much as whatever you're saying makes sense, but I just don't want that coming from you. If Kenyan president said that, that will make a bit of sense. Ugandan president said that, I don't know if I'll receive it, but that will make a bit of sense, because it's tragic and that conflict is deplorable and should not be happening. But coming from you, who also laid even far worse atrocities toward a certain, the Tigrayans, I think you should hold your horses, and I think you should just, find a place and just, relax. But I do agree with the first part of your advice, and that is this conflict in Sudan should be left for, you mentioned East Africa Regional Grouping and IGAD. As long as it's Africa addressing and taking care of this matter, I think I don't have a problem. It might not need to be in like Kenya or whatever. The conflict in Ethiopia, the mediation first happened in Pretoria in South Africa, and then later on another phase of it was concluded here in Nairobi. So it does not matter where it happens as long as it's within the continent. For me, I don't think I'll have a problem. But I will have a problem if, say, Egypt also was having a meeting with the Arab League, I think over the weekend, and that formed part of the conversation they were having. I will have a problem if Egypt is perhaps mediating this process, or Eritrea is mediating this process, or any other country that seems to have vested interest or has been mentioned in a way that might compromise the whole thing. We need parties that are neutral and that do not have any conflict of interest in this conflict, so that we can have an atmosphere that allows for open communication and allows for proper neutral negotiations or mediation to happen. Because at this point, I think negotiation is just what we need right now. Forms of conflict resolution, we have mediation, we have negotiation, we have arbitration and other means. So I think at this point, what we need is to negotiate for a solution. I think that is what we need before we arrive to certain compromises and see what is it that you want and how can we concede and give part of that, and maybe that the other side you might not get, but also give consideration to what the other side wants and all that. So there has to be a negotiation, and this negotiation must happen in a space where all actors feel there is some level of neutrality, and the mediators who are leading the process also must not be seen to be leaning towards any side. Okay, so whatever it happens in the continent, as long as any of those countries is not involved, I think I'll be happy to have it done anywhere in this continent. And if we can keep off all these other external factors, that will be best. Because as long as we have so many of these people involved in this process, we might see it prolong unnecessarily for a long time. Okay? So I think it should be an African affair, and I totally agree. As much as it has this international concern and it has affected so many people, you can see how many people have now been forced to arrange for an urgent evacuation of their citizens, and embassies are closing down and all that. It is a matter of global concern, but nevertheless, I think Africa is capable of handling this conflict, and it should be left to maybe African Union to steer this process. Or IGAD already took its reins, but these three presidents have not met yet. They were supposed to fly into, was it South Sudan? South Sudan's president wrote a letter to both parties and asked for them to have their representatives go to South Sudan. And I think for the Rapid Support Forces have not replied to that, have not agreed to that. The army said they are ready and they have their people ready. So I think they're waiting for the RSF also to appoint or to agree even to send their representative so that the IGAD members who were picked to spearhead this process can start this process. But I feel like they're taking too long, man. That was like over a week ago. Like, this is something urgent. Are there any other ways that you could find interventions and see that we're able to get everybody on the table very quickly? Because I think time is of the essence here, and the more time we take, the more the Sudanese especially really, really continue to suffer. The rest of the foreign nationals, they've been flown back to their countries and they're settling back there. But the Sudanese have been left to themselves to kill each other, to suffer. There's no food, there's no water. It's very tough for the citizens of Sudan, the indigenous people there. So I think time is of the essence, and we need to speed up with this process and see, number one, how can we have a cessation of hostilities? That is the first goal. And then we see how we negotiate everything else from there. So I think it's important, and these heads of state and the meeting they're supposed to be having and all that, I do understand the factors that must be in place for you to even meet. It's taking too long, I think. There has to be something else that can be done, surely, to compel these generals to have their representatives in Juba so that this conversation and this mediation process can start, so that we can alleviate at least partly the hardships that the people of Sudan has to deal with and continue to deal with there. That is a direct threat to their own being there in Sudan. So I think that is what really matters right now. So any which way we can quickly have these generals and their people come in Juba and start talking, I think the better for the people who are suffering unnecessarily. And to borrow the words of Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki, it is tragic and deplorable what is happening to the people of Sudan. I want to thank you so much for your time this morning. Hopefully I can see you here at 3 p.m. East African time for more news from across the continent of Africa. My name is Miriam Ogotu. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.